Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today I've got something very exciting to share with you. So I've been given 3 new cards to reveal to all of you as part of the upcoming Winter War expansion that's coming to Cards November 29th. You can buy pre-orders now. This expansion, if you haven't heard about it already, it has over 80 brand new cards, 2 new keywords, new ally, Finland. So that's going to be a ton of fun. They've revealed a bunch of the cards already. You can check out other videos on my channel where I go over and give my thoughts on the cards and give my evaluation as a competitive player. But we're not talking about the cards that have already been revealed today. We are going to be talking about 3 brand new cards. So without further ado, let's jump straight into them. Alright, so the first card I'm going to be revealing here today is the 78th Steel Regiment. It is a 3-cost 2/2 infantry for Poland, standard rarity, and has Fury and deployment, gets +2/+2 for each enemy unit in the front line. So, this is going to be a very powerful unit that serves both a little bit of a defensive and an offensive idea of how you want to run it in your deck. So how this works is if your opponent has, say, 3 units in the front line. You know, they play turn 1 Cavalry Regiment, turn 2 35T, turn 3 any other unit to the front line, and you're worried about them having these 3 units in the front line, and you just slam down a 38th Steel Regiment. That is going to be a 1 operation 8/8 with Fury on turn 3. Now, this requires your opponent to have 3 units in the front line, which you're going to have to deal with, but you have an 8/8 with Fury. So on the following turn, for 2 credits, you can destroy 2 of these units, and it doesn't matter what units they are, you're just going to be nuking them off the planet because you have an 8/8. And now, obviously, an 8/8 is very extreme. Maybe you don't want your opponent to get 3 units to the front line before you play this out. Maybe you just play this out with 2 units. That's still a 6/6 with Fury. That's going to at least trade 2 for 1, if not 3 for 1. Easily 4 for 1. And all of this in the form of a standard. Now, before you start running to the hills worried that you're going to be getting blown out by 38th Steel Regiments, this does require your opponent to have the front line. Which means that if your opponent is playing a control deck, they're not taking the front line, this can be a little bit slower, so you have to judge whether or not you are going to hold on to this and wait for your opponent to eventually take the front line so you can get some value out of the deployment effect, or you could just play this as a 3-cost 2/2 Fury, which is not amazing, but it has Fury. The Fury keyword is very, very scary, and if your opponent's not taking the front line, that means you can get this to the front line, and things can very, very quickly get out of hand for your opponent. So I don't expect this to be making it into Tier 1 meta decks, except for very specific metas, because if everybody is taking the front line, this could be a very, very powerful defensive tool. However, where this card is going to shine is in low-budget decks and in draft. Because this is a standard, it's very, very easy to get your hands on this card, and this card is incredibly powerful. It doesn't matter if your opponent's getting Red Devils to the front line, you know, they're getting their 5th Rangers, they're getting their Bicycle Regiments, all of these specials and these Tier 1 meta decks. You can just play 78th Steel Regiment and just crush them. You know, like, if you're getting blown out by Jaguar on front line, throw a couple of these guys in your deck. It's gonna work out pretty well for you, I think. And if you want to be picking Poland in draft, maybe you're not getting the cards for a good Legions draft going, a good Intel deck going, just pick up a couple of 78th Steel Regiments, and it doesn't matter if you're on the back foot, because slamming down a 4/4 and 6/6 and 8/8 Fury in draft is going to be pretty good. And even if you're playing this as a 4/4, that's still good. A 3-cost 4/4 Fury, that is good. That is better than the standard, which is the just 3-cost 4/4 flat stats. So if you're getting a single unit off of this, it's good. If you're getting more than that, it's great. So that's the 78th Steel Regiment, and that's my thoughts on the card. But let's get to the next card I'm here to reveal, which is Ingenuity, a 2-cost British order. Choose one of 3 random British or US bombers to add to your hand. So we've seen the choose one of 3 elite cards. Those have been in the game for a very long time. Those have been very, very powerful, very, very popular cards. But now we're seeing that this effect is, at least for Britain, moving to a different class of cards. And the card itself is a limited rarity, which means you can run multiple in this deck. It's going to be easier to get your hands on, especially if you are a smaller collection player. And let's talk about what class of cards this is. This is going to be a British or US bomber. Now, a lot of people might immediately think that this card is not so good, because there's a lot of not so good British and US bombers. However, you are choosing one of 3 options, which means you are always getting the best of 3 options, which means that this card is actually not that bad. There's actually a lot of very, very good options. So the odds that one of the 3 options is something that is very, very good is relatively high. And since there's a wide spectrum of bombers, you know, there's the Swordfish, the 1 cost 1/3, there's Albacore, the 2 cost 1/2 deployment, deal 1 damage and pin an enemy unit, to the B-17s, the B-17Fs, the 5/5 heavy armor, the 6/6 heavy armor. You can even get a super fortress off of this. So there's a very wide range of size of units you can get off of this, and the size of the unit that you want to get off of this depends a lot on what your current hand is looking like, what type of deck you're playing, and what type of deck your opponent is playing. So maybe in a control mirror, although it's not, you know, an amazing card, something like the Liberator, the 7/5 heavy armor 1 bomber for US. Now that's a card that's not typically seen as good. It's very, very expensive. It doesn't have any deployment effect. It doesn't have blitz. It's just a very large bomber. However, if you're against a control deck that has already expended a lot of its utility removing the other cards in your deck, suddenly Liberator's not looking that bad. So depending on the different contexts that you can find yourself playing Ingenuity in, it actually makes cards that might otherwise not be that good a lot better. Like, there's even situations where maybe you want to pick something like the Blenheim, the 3 cost 2/3 bomber, just because it fits your hand better, it fits your curve better. You want to get that out with a bunch of other things to try to create multiple threats on the board for your opponent to deal with at once. So what I love about Ingenuity and the cards of this variety is it really lets you pick and use this card how you want, depending on the matchup, depending on the context, and that's going to give an extra layer of choice onto how you use this card. And because it's a 2-cost order, it can actually be run in a wide variety of decks. You can run this in a dedicated air deck that's running things like precision bombing, that's utilizing the fact that you're just generating all of these bombers. You can run this in a more tempo-oriented deck, where, again, you're trying to find these cheap things, these things with blitz off of it, but if you get a big threat, that can often be good enough, because if you're playing a tempo air deck, your opponent is usually dumping their removal as quickly as they can. So if you can get, you know, a big Liberator down on the board, that's going to be very, very good. Now, you might even want to consider running this in control decks, because there's a couple of very, very good cards you can get off of this. Very, very powerful control cards that do see play. Things like the B-17, deployment, destroy a random enemy unit, the Elite Lancaster, the 7-cost 5/4, there's the Wellington, the 7-cost 4/3 that gets its cost reduced when you play orders. There's a lot of very, very good bombers in Britain and US that, you know, you want in your deck, and with Ingenuity you can get extra copies of them, or you can get different cards that might fit your different situations better. So all in all, I think Ingenuity, you might not see it immediately put into tier 1 decks, but I think this is a card that a lot of people are going to be sleeping on. I think this is a card that has a lot of potential in the future, and if you're a player who likes cards that have a bit more of a random effect, that are going to behave and function differently in every game, this is a card for you. If you're trying to build a sort of Britain-US bomber airplane-themed deck and you have a lower collection, this card is for you. Or if you just want to try out some of the new cards, try out something fun, look at cards you might not have, this card is for you. But now, we've looked at Ingenuity, and we've looked at the 38th Steel Regiment. This is a standard, Ingenuity is a limited. Now, the third card I have to reveal for you all today is a German Elite. And not just any German Elite. This isn't just a well-statted unit. This isn't just a staple you're going to put into every single German deck until the end of time. What I have to reveal to you today is Alpenfestung, which is probably an absolute butchering of the word. Apologies to the German speakers out there. But what this card is a 7-cost German order. Set your HQ's defense to 25, remove the top 10 cards of your deck. So I'm going to give that a second to sink in, because this is a card that is unlike anything we have seen in the game before, and it is especially unlike anything we have ever seen for Germany before. So Germany is a nation that has no healing. There is no way to increase the HQ if you are with the German cards. You can run allies that allow you to increase your HQ, and that's something we have seen with German Britain control decks, German Japan control decks, where you are running these HQ cards. But this is the first time we have seen Germany having a German card that increases the HQ. Except it does not come for free. this is increasing your HQ at the cost of 10 cards off of your deck. So you are making your deck 10 cards smaller. This could potentially be destroying very key cards like Leopold or Comet that you otherwise might want to find. So there is a cost to this. Except it's also interesting that it's the top 10 cards of your deck. So there's very, very high-level ways to use this card. When you're playing things like Spoils of War, when you're playing things like the Panzer H, it says choose a card. You get 3 options, you choose one, and put the other 2 at the bottom of your deck. So now you know that those cards are safe from when you play Alpenfestung. Again, apologies to the Germans. However, maybe you see all of the cards at the bottom of your deck are weaker cards, meaning that you're likely to have very, very good cards in the next 10 cards, so you save this until you get to around the bottom 10 cards of your deck, and then you play this going into Fatigue. Or you wait until you're already drawing into Fatigue, and you play this, and then you don't even pay the cost, because your deck is already empty. It's just straight set your HQ to 25. Now, let's talk about how good is setting your HQ to 25. Because obviously, if you play it and you're at full health, it's 7 cost, gain 5 health, lose 10 cards of your deck, which is really, 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 really bad. However, if you play this and you're at 1 health, this is 7 cost, gain 24 health, which is the equivalent of almost 4 fortifications. That's pretty good for a single card. So how good is healing 25? I think this card is going to be very, very good, especially considering German does not have any other healing. So you can run this in decks that don't have healing, and as long as you have a way to somewhat reliably get this against aggro, like if you're running things like the Spoils of War, like the Heinkel to generate Spoils of War, Panzer H's to search through your deck to find this, you can actually relatively rely on this because the set to health to 25 is specifically good against aggro, and aggro is specifically what German control struggles against when they don't run healing. So you can run this in something like a German-US ramp deck, which is a very popular deck on ladder, that has to rely entirely on weakened duets and the milk trucks for healing. Now, if you put Alpenfestung in your deck, you can do like War Machine into Hour of Need, into ASW Patrol, and your opponent floods out the board and they hit you down to 5 health, and then you just play this. You've healed 20, and then you just start slamming bomb after bomb after bomb, and it doesn't matter that the top 10 cards of your deck is gone, because every card in your deck is bombs. So you can use it like that. You can use this in more of a traditional German control with a discard shell, or just relying on removal in large units, because Germany typically doesn't try to win on Fatigue. That's not typically the strategy they employ. They try to discard their opponent's hand. They try to do very high tempo 1-for-1s, or generate 2-for-1s with things like Annihilation, and then just win off of things like Comet and Leopold, where it's just very, very powerful units that are able to generate a ton of value. So the fatigue factor is not that big of a deal. So if you run this card and then you're relying on things like King Tiger as your win condition or Comet as your win condition, yeah, the 10 cards off your deck, not that big of a deal. I think a lot of people very typically overvalue how bad losing cards off of your deck is. We saw this a lot with the resistance cards back in the day. People really, really, really dislike losing cards from their deck. But I'm going to tell you, it's not that bad. It's the exact same thing as if those 10 cards are in the bottom 10 cards of your deck. Unless you hit fatigue, up until the moment you draw into your first fatigue, it's the same as those cards just being in the bottom of your deck. And how often are you going to hit fatigue? Not very often. How often are you going to hit fatigue in a situation where you would win without hitting fatigue, but are going to lose now because of the fatigue? Again, not very often. So this is a very, very, very powerful card that supports all sorts of different German control archetypes. You can even run this in something like a German midrange as just a one-off healing card, because again, if you're in a more aggressive deck, if you're a fast-paced midrange deck, sure, you might want a bit of healing, especially depending on what the meta is. If there's a lot of things like burn in the meta that your deck is just slightly too weak against, you're perfectly fine spending 10 cards off your deck, because if you're an aggro or a midrange deck, you have no intention of ever reaching fatigue. So this is just a very powerful card in all sorts of archetypes for Germany, and I think that this is going to be a very core card for how German control is built moving forward. And it's not just a card, like Sincerely Yours, where it's just really good. You just throw that in any deck and it's really good. You have to think about, when you're putting this in your deck, you have to think about how you are playing this card, and it does have consequences, and it will punish you if you play this incorrectly, if you don't fully think through the implications of playing this card, and that's what we love to see in cards. Cards that really reward players for their deck building, reward players for their smart decision making, and punish players for making mistakes. So that's what you can expect and more from Winter War. That is it for me today. However, again, subscribe to my channel if you want to see my reviews and thoughts on all of the cards that are being revealed throughout this expansion. And a big thanks to 1939 for sending me these cards and allowing me the opportunity to reveal them to you. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.